Let's go back to one of our top stories, the Ford cabinet meeting to discuss whether to delay a return to in-classroom learning, which of course is now set at most school boards for next Monday. But an Ottawa epidemiologist calling for schools to remain closed for several more weeks amid the surge in Omicron cases. Ottawa science educator Dr. Raywat Deonandan joins us now. Good morning, Doc. Good to see you. Thanks for your time.
Good morning.
Doctors are really split over this. I know in terms of online versus in classroom. You know about that letter, 500 doctors urging schools stay open. Why do you think they need to stay closed and for how long?
Well, a couple of reasons. First is that given the isolation protocols and given the rate at which Omicron is spreading, if we open now, chances are a lot of people are going to get exposed really, really fast, and a lot of people will therefore have to isolate. So if we're going to send teachers and kids home within a couple of weeks anyway, what's the point of opening right now unless we have different isolation procedures and controls? The second reason is epidemiologically. In this province, we have about 1 million kids who either can't be vaccinated or aren't vaccinated. That's 1 million people who are about to get exposed very, very quickly because Omicron spreads that fast. And even a low hospitalization rate, let's say 1%, or less than that, means hundreds, if not thousands, of people hospitalized in a short period of time. So I think the risk is too great unless we put in place much better mitigation tools.
Rapid tests. If we were able to
Rapid
give every
tests,
family rapid test, would that be the compromise here?
that would be useful, but in addition, you need better quality masks for all the people in schools. You need a vaccine mandate for all the adults in schools. You need better ventilation, HEPA filters in each of the classrooms. You need a variety of tools that, frankly, we should have been putting in place weeks, if not months ago. So closing now for a couple of weeks buys us time to do those things and to bypass possibly the worst of the wave in Ontario.
So this is just buying time. So you're saying a couple of weeks, you're going to obviously monitor the caseload and just sort of stretch it out so that we're not overwhelmed. Is that a fair statement?
I think a couple of weeks to begin with to see how it looks. I mean, I don't want to make predictions here because we're not very good at that. But the thing about Omicron is that it's going to have a very high peak, but a shortened wave. This might just be a weeks-long endeavor lasting out this wave. And so it behooves us to protect the unvaccinated children as much as we can. We haven't got procedures in place to do so right now, so let's use that time wisely. Look south of the border. Look at the pediatric hospitalization rates. They're scary. I don't want that to be Ontario.
Okay, so what if we were to say the kids who are vaccinated can go back to class and those who are not vaccinated can go online? And therefore, I mean, they're vaccinated. Isn't that why we got vaccinated? To be able to live with really a variant that's not Delta?
Yeah, that's an interesting possibility. Now that precludes everybody under 5, so and a lot of the elementary schools. So I think there aren't sufficient vaccinated kids in the elementary range to make that a viable solution. For the high schools and middle schools, I think that's a strategy worth exploring. But again, exposures are going to happen, and so we got to change the isolation procedures to see is an exposure sufficient reason to keep a classroom at home, because we're going to have so many people staying at home simply because one or two get infected that this whole house of cards crumbles. So different rules have to be established.
But again, Omicron is not Delta. For example, we are getting hundreds of cases here in the city. Let's talk locally here. Hundreds of cases, an increase setting records almost every day. And yet we have 8 people in Ottawa hospitals and just 1 in the ICU. Isn't that the metric we should be making the decisions with?
Eventually, yeah, and we'll get there. It's just that we're at the beginning of this wave. The beginning, the numbers are going to get really staggeringly high. And at that point, even a tiny percentage that end up in hospital, a tiny percentage of a large number ends up being a large number. So expect that number to climb. I hope I'm wrong. Like, I could be wrong. It depends entirely on the vaccination rates. And Ottawa tends to have high vaccination rates. I actually don't expect Ottawa to fare too badly in this. It's the province as a whole I'm looking at.
Right. So why don't we just keep our schools open locally? Because the numbers are warranted, don't
Yeah,
they?
it's possible. I'm not opposed to a regional approach. It's just that we have to have this conversation.
What about isolation? For example, the CDC says cut it in half. So instead of 10 days to 5 days, would that be something you'd be open to?
Yeah, changing the isolation length is something we have to have a conversation about. What the CDC is also saying, though, is that we don't differentiate between vaccinated and unvaccinated, which I think is an issue. And they're saying do away with the negative test to warrant entering society, which I think is a huge mistake. You don't want people who tested positive in the past re-entering society without a negative test. That has to be kept in place.
We've been going back and forth. We've been told do this, and then this will happen, and we'll get it through it. And then here we are with Omicron. We had Christmas, we're about to have New Year's, and many people say we've lost the room in many cases. Are you worried that the gatherings are going to happen anyway, and then in, well, 10 days, we're going to be in a real mess?
Yeah, they're going to happen. I think we're at that point where a lot of people have stopped listening to public health. So what are we going to do? I think our vaccination rates are going to help a lot. It means that the overwhelming majority of cases are going to be mild. It's just that I'm petrified for the under fives who can't be vaccinated, and for the other unvaccinated people, and for a contingent of people for whom the vaccines won't work that well. So that means our healthcare system is going to be challenged provincially. And I'm already hearing reports from colleagues saying they're stretched to the limit. And we're more fragile now than ever before because of the reduced healthcare worker capacity.
Care to take a stab at an end date here in 2022?
Well, yeah. The IHME modeling suggests that in Canada, the wave will peak sometime in late January, early February, and peter off weeks after that. And by April, at the latest, we will see the end of the Omicron wave. And I think at that point, there'll be so much immunity from infection and recovery combined with vaccination that it'll be unlikely we will see subsequent waves. But this disease throws us curves every other week. So this is just a thought, not a prediction.
Going to hang on to that end there, because that's what we need to get us through this. Be patient, hang in there. It'll be spring.
It'll be spring, maybe earlier if Omicron ends earlier. It'll be a short wave.
That would be nice. That's the upside, the silver lining. Happy New Year, Doc. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Raywat Deonandan.